I'm Buster Hogan. I was born in East Texas, just I know, around Palestine. Don't really know when. I don't remember ever seeing my birth certificate or having birthdays or nothing, but they said it's May or in the spring sometime. 1906 or something, maybe. Never knew my daddy. My mom, I lived with her, but she weren't never around. Didn't go to school much, got in trouble for that. Anyhow, she was always bringing men around, and they'd get along all right for a while. And go to drinking, go to fighting, and then he'd leave. Wouldn't be long, she'd have a different one. They always pretty well left me alone. That's fine with me. Then one day, I don't know, I was 12, 14, something like that. She brung one home, and she always called me Red, and he got to calling me Red, and there's something about the way he called me Red. Boy, I didn't like it at all. She told me one time when I was pretty little that my grandpa, her daddy, had called me Buster. And I like that a darn sight better than Red for some reason. But the way that feller called me Red just stuck in my craw. He was always just a little smart aleck and kind of mean sounding. Yeah, they'd get along for a while and go to drinking and partying, and they'd come in late and break things up and fight. And they'd make up and get along for a while, and then they'd fight again. One night they was out really late, and I went to bed, went to sleep, heard them when they came in, and they was kind of fighting and fussing a little bit, but they was drunk. Then they went to laughing and breaking things. And for long, it got quiet, and I went on off to sleep again. Woke up next morning, and I didn't remember really I'd had much to eat yet. I was 12 or 14, somewhere around there. So I get up next morning, and I go in there, and I start to make me a little bit of coffee and some eggs. There's some bacon in there, and I went to frying it up a little bit. Well, he come in there all mad and all hungover, and went to hollering and cussing, and grabbed me and dragged me out the back door and throwed me in the backyard, and went to just beating on me. I woke up a little while later, and eyes was swelled up, I was bleeding, and spit a little blood out, and then I went dragging myself into the house, went to my room, went to bed. I had no idea what time it was or how long I'd been out there in the yard, but went to getting dark, and I heard them come on back in and crashing through the house and busting stuff up, and he was hitting on her, and she was screaming and yelling at him. And after a while, they kind of calmed down, and got quiet, and they went on in there to bed. They was laughing again, drunk. I waited till it got real quiet. I snuck in there to the kitchen, got a couple of cans of vegetables and some canned meat. Scraped up that bacon I'd cooked that morning that ain't nobody ate. Threw it in a bag and wrapped it up in a quilt with a blanket or two and a jacket. Extra pair of shoes I had. Reached up in the top of the closet and I got an old hat down that'd been my grandpa's, or she said it had been, I don't know. I lit out. Just lit out. Walked most of that night. Good part of the next day, and I just got so tired I couldn't walk no more, and I crawled over in the trees, side of the road out there, and kind of hid and went to sleep. Next thing I knew is morning, and I heard a rattling of an old Model T. Turned out to be a little old pickup Model T. Pulled up on the road and scared me to death, and I went to running through the brush. Left my stuff just laying there. In a minute, this old feller kind of tackled me, grabbed me by the nape of the neck, and then he tripped over his big old spurs, fell down right on top of me, and I thought that hurt worse than getting beat up the night before. He got me up and got me calmed down, and got him calmed down, and told me his name and asked mine. Wendell Jameson. Wendell Jameson. He's a tall cowboy with a big dark mustache, big old black hat, tall boots, brand new pair of Levi's breeches on. Told him my name's Buster. He said, that sounds like a darn good name to me, Buster. He said, what's your last name? I said, I don't rightly know for sure, but I go by Hogan. That's my granddaddy's name. So he asked me where I was headed, and I said, you know, I heard in school there's cowboys out in West Texas. I wanted to go be a cowboy. He said, well, sir, anybody looking for you? And I said, no, sir, I doubt they're looking. He said, well, you just, well, come on with me. That's what I did. So I went off with old Wendell, and he took me up to Panhandle near Paducah, Texas. Panhandle Land and Cattle Company. Went on off into some of them canyon country, that rough country. I didn't know nothing, but them boys was awful patient with me. Taught me a lot. I was there for a few years. And Wendell was good to me. Better than anybody else I'd ever known. Had a little bit of a knack for the horses, and so they took me in and trusted me, let me ride a few, and they'd trust me out there doing a job and some responsibility as long as I was with Wendell. And after Wendell died, well, I don't want to talk about that right now. But after that, I just sort of drifted. Just drifted. When I first come back to Texas, signed on here with the Jameson Ranch. Old man Jameson was Wendell's older brother. He's an old school cowboy, cowman, good to work for. I was his remuda man. He sent the wagon out a big chunk of the year, and he's, like I say, good to work for. But then one evening at the wagon, his horse come in without him, and the horse wasn't hurt. There wasn't no blood. So that was kind of strange. And so we get on our horses and we go looking for him, and we found him out yonder. He came off his horse at some point. Heart attack or something, but he's dead. Everything went to changing around here after that. Tom, his son, a little younger than me, he's more modern thinking than the old man was, and they went to working them cows in the chutes and the calves and the calf table and stuff like that. And when they turned out them old horses and sold off all the good young ones, I put that chuck wagon off in the barn and locked it up. I quit. I didn't want to work on an outfit like that. I'm a remuda man. So there wasn't no hard feelings. I leased this little old place from Tom, and got a little old bunkhouse kind of house with a kitchen and saddle house and corrals and a little old round pen over there, and trying to make a living riding horses for the public, riding horses for me. It ain't always easy, but I reckon if it was easy to be Buster Hogan, everybody'd be trying to be Buster Hogan. And I don't see nobody forming no lines. Charlie ought to be here pretty soon. He wanted to go ride some horses this afternoon. Domino boys ain't showing up today. It's a little busy here in town, but not so much here at Joe's Feed Store. Joe Desmond runs the store here. He married old Mr. Wilson's youngest daughter. Worked for him for years, and then when they got married, he kept working here, and then Mr. Wilson died, and they took over the business. Me and old Harvey and Hatcher and Walters, the Domino Club, generally sit here and play us a hand. They ain't showing up today. I don't reckon they'd already be here. Charlie will be here, I reckon, soon as school's out. He generally comes by here on his way home. I remember the first day I ever met that kid. We were sitting here playing dominoes, and we heard the awfulest yelling and hollering to the old rail yard. There ain't no railroads here, but the railroad used to come right through here, and there's a warehouse over there, and we heard that yelling over there. I didn't know what it was, and I just jumped up. No barrel in there that Joe keeps some axe handles and some hoes and some rakes and stuff in, and I went in there and I grabbed that axe handle and just went a-running over there. When I got over there, there's 3 pretty big boys beating up on a little kid. That little kid was bloody and hollering. Well, I put an end to that mess, and I wouldn't ever hit them with that axe handle, but I dang sure wanted them to think I would. Anyhow, we got old Charlie up. We got him over here and cleaned him up a little bit, took him back home, and his mom weren't too happy with me, that's for sure. But anyway, after that day, he just sort of took up with us fellas. He'd come over here and watch us play dominoes, try to get in on a hand every once in a while. When Walters would get mad and storm off, he'd take up his hand and play a little bit. He learned a little bit. Mostly he's learned about the horses. He's been riding with me about a year, a little bit in the afternoons and on Saturdays when his parents will let him. I don't think his mama's still too keen on me. But I don't know. I think that boy can learn something about the horses and maybe do pretty good. But anyway, he's been kind of an interesting little friend of mine. He ought to get here any minute. I like to read my Bible some in the morning. Wasn't always that way. But during that time I was drifting, ended up down at Pendleton, Oregon. Big Pendleton Roundup. Always wanted to see that rodeo on the grass and that big old stadium and all them Indian teepees and Indian dances and roping and bronc riding. So I ended up there and camped out for a couple of nights, but it just wasn't no way to sleep at that campground out there at the rodeo ground. It never did calm down. Finally found me a little room at a boarding house down on the other end of town, and I could get me a little room and it'd be a little more quiet. There's a Bible in that boarding house, and it's marked up. It had some pages where it'd have a number, tell you to go to a page number, and then it'd have some underlinings, and down at the bottom of that, it'd have another page to go to, and every time you got through reading the underlined part, you'd go to the next page and read another. And then I'd heard a little bit about the Lord when I was out in California, and them boys was breaking horses with their daddy, and I stayed with them for a while, and they kept saying God made that horse for a purpose, and he made us for a purpose. And I didn't believe there's no purpose for me at all, really. But when I sat there in that room in that boarding house, and I went to reading that Bible, it said all of us have sinned, and I knew that. Don't take you long to live to know that. It said the wages of sin is death. I'd drawn wages. I knew what wages was. You do some work and you get wages. Whatever you do, wages is what you deserve. Should be. So I thought about it, and I thought the wages of sin is death. And boy, I figured wasn't no count to me much, and I was in pretty bad shape. But then it said the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. It said he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That's John 3:16 over there. But the one that meant the most to me was this right here in Romans 5:8. But God commendeth his love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I ain't never been loved by nobody. Really? Then I went and found that scripture verse there that said God loved us so much that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever might believe in him and have eternal life. And then that one right there, boy, it got me. He loved us so much. Christ died for us. Goes on to say in Romans that believe Jesus who he said he was, and you say it with your mouth. You're willing to tell people about it. Oh, don't not shy away, but own up to it. You be saved. And I figured if anybody needed to be saved, I did. So when it says he loved us so much, he let his Son Jesus die for us so that we might be saved, I'll take that for sure. Ain't sure too cold out here today to play dominoes. I know a lot of people probably think I'm crazy taking that little Charlie kid in and showing him some things and spending time with him. I'm not sure his parents know much about it or think much about it. I don't know, I'm just sort of an old drifting cowboy. I don't blame him much, but fella took me under his wing, taught me a little bit. Wendell Jameson. I was thinking the other day about when he died and turned my life upside down. I ran away. He found me. Just kind of made me part of his life and took me out on the ranch, and them old fellas out on the ranch just sort of took me in, let me just work like a cowboy. They just didn't ever think nothing different of it. Probably mostly because of Wendell. They liked Wendell a lot. He had a lot of respect for him. And we was out gathering some remnants, and they'd been a bunch in this rough country up out north end of that Panhandle Cattle Company up there in the Panhandle north of Paducah. There was just a whole lot of cattle that he got loose, and they ain't got brought in the drive year, maybe 2 years, I don't know. We was in a little old box canyon, and we'd circle through and run some of them out, and they's long-eared, long-horned, rangy looking things, and some of them had 2 calves on them, last year's calves still on them, and the baby running by their side. And we was just about out of that canyon, and most of them had got turned back out into the flats out by the rest of the herd where you could kind of pick them up. The rest of the crew was in some of them other little old crags and stuff. Me and Wendell was trotting off out there. We was about to head out into the herd out from that canyon, and this one old cow turned back. She's mean. I could tell when she turned around she's mean, and she was not wanting to go out of that box canyon. She'd been safe there for a while, and the only thing that ever made a difference in her life was when the bull come around, I reckon. Wendell and I was just trotting along, and we just about had her out of that canyon, and she turned. She just come right back at us. We wasn't letting her by, so we just kept on at her, and then she just went straight up a rock cliff. It was just almost straight up. She went up that sucker like a mountain goat. That big old bull calf, yearling, is with her. He tried to follow her up, and he just tumbled on down. Little baby calf was just sitting there wringing his tail. He didn't know what to do, but she was not getting caught. And right as she got up just close to that, I looked up and I saw a loop just drop like a net on the water right over her head. Wendell threw a big old long loop. And then she just come tumbling down that cliff. And when she tumbled down that cliff, she just rolled right over Wendell, right over the top of him. Big old mess of feet and legs and horns, hollering, bellowing. That horse was hollering and that cow was bellowing, and that horse rolled right over the top of Wendell. I just sort of heard him grunt. When they come to a stop down at the bottom of that cliff, off the hill a little ways, Wendell was mashed to a pulp. His horse had 2 broken legs and was still hollering and neighing and grunting. And that darn cow was still alive. Had a broke leg in the front. She was still up on them other 3 legs, jerking on that rope and bellowing. I don't even remember a lot of what happened after that. I do know I got that Winchester out of Wendell's saddle that he carried around for snakes or varmints or something bad come up, coyote or whatever. And I shot that cow dead. I put Wendell's horse down. Evidently, I emptied that rifle into that dead cow. Then I just beat her with that gun. Some of the boys come riding up. They'd heard them gunshots. They found me laying there, sort of sitting and laying on the side of a rock there, holding Wendell's head in my lap, blood everywhere. I reckon they thought I shot everybody. But it didn't take them long to figure out. I ain't never been the same after that day, but I can say this. From that moment forward, I guarantee I never threw my loop over the head of a blame cow. No, sir. Never again. This horse, he ain't perfect. He's got some issues, but I think he's gonna be all right to pack an old man like me around. He's the last foal of his mama. She was a pretty good little sorrel filly. He's flea bit, you can see, got that sorrel color in him. And fact is, I had his mama for a good little while. Started her as a 2-year-old, a little over 2, filly. One of the first horses that Charlie Baker rode with me. In fact, it's that little sorrel mare, little sorrel filly. She bucked Charlie off right over there. That's where she bucked him off. One of the first horses I ever let him get on that was a young colt, young one we was starting out. I let him ride a little more seasoned horses for a little while, but then when he got a little bit more confident in the saddle, I let him get on a couple, and he got to where he had a knack. He was pretty good at it. That little filly didn't really buck too much. He mostly just kind of crow hopped and then jumped out from under him, but boy, he landed face first over in that dirt right over there, and he come up spitting dirt and coughing. Scared me to death right at first. I thought, well, I done got the preacher's kid killed and his mom's gonna have me put in jail. But I went over and got hold of him and got him up off the ground and got that horse settled down, and she was all right and he was all right. And I asked him, I said, Charlie, you know what you need to do now? He spit some more dirt out of his mouth and he said, well, I reckon I better get back on her. And I said, well, yeah, that's what you need to do. He said, you ready? He said, no, I'm not. In fact, I don't want to, but I know better. He got back on her, and you know what? She never offered to buck another time in her life. She had several babies for me, all of them good ones, and this is the last one. I had to put her down last year. She was bad to colic, and she just got real bad and got her feet all messed up and couldn't keep that laminitis out of her and keep her healthy, and I finally put her down last year. Broke my heart to have to do it. She's a good mare. But you know, talking about this colt right here, same thing as Charlie, getting back on that colt. If you ain't teaching a kid or a dog or a horse to do the right thing, you're teaching them to do the wrong thing, whether you mean to or not. When I was a kid, they just throw a loop over an old horse, maybe 4 or 5 years old, ain't even ever been touched. Big old gawky son of a guns, big bone. Might even have to tie up his back leg to get on him or put a blindfold on him, and then as soon as you got up in that saddle, they'd pull that back leg half hitched loose and they'd jerk that blindfold off, and you'd ride him till he quit bucking and hope he'd make a day's work before you had to get off of him, or at least till you changed your mounts. You dang sure didn't want to get off of him any more than you had to. You'd have to start that mess all over again. But as I said, whenever old Wendell died, I went to drifting. Drifted to Nebraska and Wyoming. Went to Montana, that Will James country. Ended up over by way of the Pendleton Roundup, Northern California. And then down to Central California near Carmel, Monterey. That is Vaquero horsemanship part of the world. And I didn't know nothing about any of that stuff. And I met that old man. Had them boys my age, I think I may have told you about. When I saw them working them horses slow and quiet and gentle, it just changed everything. I come back down to this country and was doing some of that. People thought I was crazy. But it's a lot better on the horses and a lot better on my beat up old bones. So that's where I am today. Starting another one. I think he'll be a pretty good horse, maybe. He's out in the pasture with them older geldings a little bit, and they pester him to death, and I think they've got him gimped up a little bit in his front. He was three-legging a little bit for me in the round pen today. It's only about the third saddling I've had on him. But after I brought him in from the pasture, I just kind of brushed him off a little bit, tied him up. I like to give him a little bit of patience, learning how to sit there and calm down. I used to tie one up after I rode him a while and smoke a cigarette. I used to smoke them Bull Durhams, roll your own. We were up there at the feed store playing dominoes one day, and Charlie Baker was there with us. And I ran out of tobacco and I had to go back to my house and get some, and so he went along with me, and we were on our way back, and I was rolling me a cigarette. He said, "Why you do that?" And I said, "Why do I do what? Why do I smoke, or why do I roll my own?" And he said, "Well, either one." And I said, "Well, I don't know." When I was a kid, working around them old cowboys, they all smoked. So I learned how to smoke. Then I got to where I liked rolling my own. I didn't like them store-bought kind. Even when they come around, I didn't like them as much, so I just kept rolling my own. And then he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, "My daddy says them things will kill you." Just like that. "My daddy says them things will kill you." And he just walked off. So I smoked the last of that cigarette, stomped it out on the ground, and just quit. I don't know if I quit for me or if I quit for Charlie, but I quit. Never smoked anymore. Think of Charlie a lot. He moved off after a few years. He rode for me, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. We hung around together and he rode some horses. His daddy's a preacher and he got called to a church over in Dallas. Boy, that kid sure didn't want to go to Dallas. I don't blame him. Miss him still. He wrote me a couple of letters there early on, but you know kids get all busy and he got over to that new place. He's busy doing stuff, I reckon. I figured maybe one of these days he'll come back. Hope he does. It ain't no fun hanging around this darn feed store no more. Be nice to have a hand of dominoes with somebody, but them young bucks they don't take time to play dominoes or nothing. They're all too big, fired up hurry. Can't get a good hand of dominoes from nobody anymore. I ain't been feeling too much like dominoes lately neither. I'll be dang, that ain't much of a hand anyway. I ain't been feeling too good lately. Laid in bed the other day feeling pretty bad. Then I felt bad and got up and tried to work my horses a little while. Fell once in the round pen. Felt so stupid. Ain't seeing too good. I don't know. I was looking for Charlie. He's taking some horses to Fort Worth tomorrow. Figured he might holler at me before he leaves, probably. But I was gonna see him this evening in case he got out early in the morning and I wasn't around. But he's probably down there in that horse trap north of the barn down there. It's where he keeps them horses. And he's done a pretty good job out here on this place, this old Jameson Ranch. When he come back after moving away, he worked for Mr. Jameson, Tom, old man Jameson's son, for a while. And then when Tom up and died, he didn't leave the ranch to Charlie, but he just well had. He left it in the trust, and it requires Charlie to be the manager of it till he sees fit not to. He's turned it into a pretty good horse operation. He shows a bunch of horses. He found me in that rest home when he come back. That mean little son of a gun, Tommy Fulton, that beat him up when he's a little kid. When I first met him, his mean old daddy ran that rest home, and he was mean, hard, yelled, cussed. Well, by the time I had my stroke and I got out there in that rest home, that blame little bully Tommy Fulton had growed up, and he's running that rest home. He wasn't no better than his daddy, probably worse. And Charlie, you might say, rescued me out of there. Brought me out here to the bunkhouse. I've been living out here ever since. And I just don't get around much no more. I'd like to come out here and watch Charlie work horses in this here round pen, and thought I'd just come out here and say howdy. But you know, it's spring, but it's still kind of chilly, and getting up in the evening here in a little while, I'm gonna go back to the house and put on a fire and get me some coffee, I think. You're welcome to join me if you'd like. It's good to visit with you. I'm gonna get out of here before the cold gets up in my bones. I'll see you directly.